passport to happiness. Affirmations, your passport to happiness. The book that's giving people positive control over their lives once again.
The Ladder Life Planning Institute is the ultimate guidance for life's inevitable destiny and your path to passionate aging and inspirational advanced care planning. LLPI offers tools that educate, inspire, and enlighten.
The views expressed on contacttalkradio.com are those of the guest hosts and callers, and not necessarily of this station, its management, or other advertisers.
This is contacttalkradio.com. Consciousness in action. And you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on tunein.com, hing.fm, and UpSnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio.
Welcome to Life Mastery with Todd Allen, the talk radio show that dives into the science of higher consciousness. Join Todd and his guests weekly at 10 a.m. Pacific Time and learn how to live a peaceful life with intentional mastery. Enjoy a survey of inspiring topics such as abundance, intention, health, manifestation, love, and transformation. It's all right here. Leading authors, speakers, coaches, entrepreneurs with stories and messages to support your well-being, let alone your most evocative dreams.
I just love that music. Hey, it's another groovy day, and that's because mostly I made it that way. When I got up this morning, I decided it's going to be a groovy day, and that's the way it goes for the rest of the day. There's a couple other good reasons too. It's Life Mastery Radio Day. I love this day. It's every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Tell your friends about us. We bring you great thoughts and ideas for you to use on your very own life mastery journey. And the third reason, three's a charm. I get to hang out with a couple of really groovy chicks and a really groovy show. Can I say it that way? You know what? I'm just being me. That's the way I talk, and I said it that way anyway. And hopefully my guests enjoy that too. So there you go. Couple of groovy chicks. Look at those smiles. They just smile. See, when you say that kind of thing, they just smile. Okay, on with the show. Before we get started, I always like to get myself centered and situated and kind of in the groove to hear some really cool ideas. And let's just take a minute and think about what it is that gives us power. What is the source of us? And it could be God, it could be Allah, it could be the dude, it could be the door, the tree, whatever it is that you connect to. Think about that for a minute, anchor it. Let's take in a deep breath. And let that breath out with a big ah, and just let your essence flow up through your heart center, throat chakra, out of your speaker box and out into the universe. Think about that power source. Let's do that one more time. This time, think about those dreams, visions, and goals. What is it that you aspire to be, do, have? Anchor those a little bit. Let's take in a deep breath. Not a little bit, anchor those a lot. That's what you want to do. Take in a deep breath. Another big let your essence flow out into the universe, those dreams, visions, and goals, aspirations. And for sure, here's the deal. Allow the universe the opportunity to make those come true for you. Because it will happen if you let it happen. What else am I doing? Oh, hi, it's Todd, and that's Jackie, my co-host. Hi, Jackie. How's it going?
It's going well. You know, when you're doing this, think of your hopes, dreams, and that kind of thing, visions,
aspirations, dreams,
aspirations. You know what I envision? I sit here in my public speaking studio in Redmond, Washington, and I envision hundreds of children and youth coming in the door with their smiling faces and raising their voices out to the world to say, I am me, I am worth being heard, and I have something to say. I can just see their smiling faces and give them that open mic, so to speak, to just...
Well, in a way that's happening. It's just virtual. I think you told me during the pre-show today that you have 10 classes a week.
I teach 10 classes a week.
10 classes a week. And you're teaching young people how to speak their voice, find their voice, and what's important to them. Did I get it right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really fun. Our first unit for the middle school and high school groups is that they develop a podcast. They decide on what would be the one topic that they're passionate about, that they would like to have a conversation with somebody about. And then they decide, well, who's an expert in that topic that they could invite as a guest to their podcast. We work on naming the podcast. We work on organizing the first 2 or 3 episodes of the podcast. We work on crafting an invitation that sounds professional and credible to be sent to this potential guest. Then we send that out. And then the last day of this 8-week course, they actually have invited this guest to come to our classroom and do a 10-minute interview with them. And we record it as if it's a podcast, and they get to keep that recording to do whatever they want with. And watching them go through this process and decide, what is it that is important enough for me to talk to somebody about? And gosh, who's the expert that I would bring on? And I tell them to dream big. I tell them to dream big. And many of them have reached out to professional athletes like NFL and NBA players. Some of them have reached out to world famous leaders and things like that, pilots and whatnot. And they don't always have their dream guest, but they always find a way to have someone who really brings out the best in them as they practice their interviews.
And some of the topics, I've seen some of your Facebook posts calling for help. Do you know somebody? Do you know somebody? And what was it? Something
I needed somebody for Greek mythology. One of my students was focusing on Greek mythology, and I don't know much about Greek mythology. So I'm like, I'm putting out the call. Who's an expert in this? And then there was someone looking for a pilot, an airline pilot, and we found somebody. And then there was someone we were trying to get a hold of Russell Wilson, who was the quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks. One of my students really wanted to interview him, and I had actually tried in many different ways to at least set the stage for getting through that conversation. Nah, he's got too many gatekeepers. But but one of them did get through to an NBA player, Dane Irwin, I think his name was. And so as soon as he came on the screen, and he was just huge guy, right? The students were like going, whoa. He takes up the whole screen. It's just really athletic.
That makes a big difference. That puts motivation in other students, and it's like, oh man, that's something you and I are both involved in Toastmasters, and competition breeds excellence, right? It's just that's part of the deal, and not that creating that competition, is a big ego thing, but it just keeps building, and the other person tries to compete with the other. And I think it's a really good thing as long as it's kept in control a little bit. That's cool. And people can find out more at the speakfeedlead.org.
It's just
website.
SpeakFeedLead, not the SpeakFeedLead, just speakfeedlead.org.
Get rid of
that'll put you into the SpeakFeedLead project, but it's speakfeedlead.org.
There you go. Get my terminology down a little bit. Well, that's really cool. And check it out. Jackie is doing amazing things, and the return on investment, you can't buy this kind of experience. You watch these kids and you think, these are our future leaders. You're empowering them with skills and abilities that they don't get until maybe not in college.
Oh, yeah. I've had some people tell me about their college experience in public speaking. Not good.
Yeah. Well, it's not only that, just finding your voice and understanding what's important to you and being able to portray that, I think, is a really cool.
And also finding the core value that
drives it.
Would never compromise on, because once you know what you believe and you also feel that you're empowered to speak, then you're not going to be blown around by the winds of, political correctness.
You should do
anything
this.
Else.
You should do that. We're going to talk about that today.
You're going to be able to stand your ground and say, no, this is what I feel is right. And so this is what I'm going to do. That's really important. I think Kristi will tell us that's important.
Yeah, we're going to talk to her. She's sitting there patiently with a big smile on her face, and three's a charm, because this is the third time we've had Kristi Hugstad back on the show.
Yay.
And just to let you know, Kristi is the author of the new book, she has many books, but the new book, which is it's a really groovy book. I'll just say it that way. It is called Be You Only Better, Real Life Self-Care for Young Adults. And I don't think it, and everyone else there, it was right there in the subtitle. And 2 other books, a certified grief recovery specialist and a grief and loss facilitator for addicts in recovery. Kristi frequently speaks at high schools. She is also the host of the Grief Girl podcast and lives in Orange County, California. You can find her online at thegriefgirl.com. That's www.griefgirl.com. And the link is on today's show page at www.lifemasterradio.net or .com. So you can find everything we talked about today. Just click on the link and away you go. You don't have to worry about writing things. Okay, I'm going to shut up and say hi, Kristi.
Hi. Hi, Todd. Hi, Jackie. Thanks again for having me.
It's great to have you back. You are a old soul with a great message coming back around, and I think that your mission is to make a difference in young people's lives. Is that right?
Absolutely. I am very passionate about suicide prevention, and that needs to start with our youth. So that's why after I wrote my first book, I thought, I need to take this back to our young people. They need a guide. They need tools so that what happened to my husband does not happen to this younger generation. Because as you know, there's a huge stigma associated with depression and mental illness. And if we're going to change that, it needs to start with our young people. So that's why now I'm real focused on writing to them.
The timing couldn't have been more perfect, right? I mean, we've sequestered, I guess is a good word, our youth, and they have, I don't want to say it like that, but I was going to say they have no hope, they have no direction, but it's hard for them to get organized with that. Is that a good statement?
Well, all of us are really going through hard times right now with the pandemic. A lot of us had our businesses shut down. Kids are learning, remotely from home. So it was very unexpected, and nobody had the tools to be able to help our kids navigate this successfully. So, the situation right now is really unusual. Yeah. And that's why I just thought, our teens need a manual for self-care. They need to know how to take care of themselves so that they don't get to that point where they're already depressed, or they don't want to be here anymore, or they have so much anxiety. It's tough enough being a teen in the first place. And then you throw the pandemic in there, and remote learning, and lack of social interaction, and it's a real struggle for our youth. So
I heard something last night that I hadn't really thought about, but I could visualize it and I could understand it. Is just the whole mask wearing thing and not getting the input from another person socially by their facial expressions.
Yeah, there's no social physical cues or anything like that.
And I was like, my gosh, that's wow, that is just wild. And anyway, I didn't mean to get off topic, but that's just something else.
I think we all feel like we're a bunch of robots walking around. And it's almost like we don't bother smiling underneath our masks because nobody's going to pick up on that energy anyway. Right?
I find myself still smiling, but then I think they can't see me. I almost want to pull my mask down and say, hi, how are you doing?
Right. So, and especially our young people, they're wired for that social element. And when they're not receiving it through their friends and family, it's going to start causing problems. And that's really what I'm trying to get at, is reach them before they need help.
Yeah.
Well, there was a word that came to my mind as you were talking about this new normal that we've all fallen into, is discombobulated. Discombobulated is just like, we're not quite sure what's up, what's down. What am I supposed to do? How motivated am I supposed to be? How much time am I supposed to spend doing this? Is it going to count anyway? There's just a lot of ifs. There's a lot more questions in our than there are answers. And that's why I'm so delighted that you have written this book, because it's going to give answers that we're all seeking. And, the youth, they look for look to their parents and other adults that care for them as to know how to handle these situations, how to get through this, how am I supposed to navigate through this? And when the parents themselves don't have the answers, we're in a world of hurt, right? And so there's just a lot of emotions that are ruling decisions now, and that could be bad.
I'm finding that's really helpful is, I work a lot now with our youth in grief counseling, and what I'm finding is they feel guilty for being depressed or having anxiety, because they'll say to me, nobody died. Nobody in my family has died. And so I don't know why I have so much anxiety. Yeah. I should be grateful that my family and my friends are all healthy. So it's so important to explain to them, grief is not just about death. We grieve so many different kinds of losses. And the big one for our youth right now is the loss of that social connection. And that's a real loss, and it needs to be validated and grieved. So once I kind of put their minds at ease and say, hey, no, that the feeling of separation, of loss of connection, trust, maybe loss of your health, loss of your mental health, all these different things, they need to be validated. It's real that you're feeling like that, and it's okay. And then they kind of step back and say, okay, I'm not going crazy. I thought I was being selfish by feeling so depressed about what's going on, because we're all in this pandemic together, right? And I haven't lost a lover. So why do I feel the way I do?
Right. I just recently, I heard from a somewhat close acquaintance of mine, not someone that I talk with quite often, but I just learned that over this past year, she had a baby. I didn't even know she was expecting. And here, so over this year's time, she's carried a baby a whole 9 months and had a new baby. And I'm like, you know what? That's so weird. And our kids and the youth, I'm sure, are starting to discover things like that there's been an entire year where they have missed out on news and information and, situational events with friends and colleagues and, acquaintances. And then, the fear of missing out is a real condition. And especially in this day and age of social media and internet, when we can, connect with someone like that and get any information we want really quickly. When we don't have the personal connection anymore, the fear of missing out turns from the social aspect to actually physical relationships with people.
Right. And there's also, you grieve what never was.
Right.
And that's a real valid type of grief. That prom you didn't have, the athletics that didn't take place, your graduation that you didn't have. Those are one-time events, a lot of them, and you can't get that time back. So it's also really normal to grieve what never was. And it's also healthy to validate that type of grief as well.
Yeah. So does your book provide specific tools for youth then to work through these different types of grieving episodes they're feeling?
Absolutely. It covers all the different elements of self-care, social, mental, emotional, physical, and financial. So I stay with the 5 basic types of self-care. And then I go in depth with each different type. And I have real stories of real young adults that have actually experienced. So let's say I'm talking about sugar. I don't have a big chapter on nutrition. I think the most important thing I can ask a young adult is cut back on the sugar. Let's start there.
Yeah.
Right. And so then there's a story of a real young adult who was struggling with sugar addiction and what they did to cut back and eventually overcome it. So I wanted to make it relatable. And I didn't want to have every chapter heavily burdened with all kinds of stats and information and overwhelm the reader. So I start with the actual self-care tool. And then for me, I'm very black and white. So if somebody doesn't tell me why I'm doing something, what's the science behind that? Why should I do that? I'm not going to do it. But if you tell me that one can of Coke has 10 teaspoons of sugar, and I am a sugar addict because I'm having 6 cans of Coke, and what it's doing to my body and my brain and my liver and my heart, that will scare me enough that I will stop consuming sugar. And so now I know what the science behind it is. And then at the end of each chapter, I also have a place. Let's how to get started, right? It's easy to tell young people or anybody to do something, but how? How do I get started? So I have a graph or a chart at the end of each chapter. All right, let's log your sugar. How much did you have this morning? Now add it up, right? How much sugar did you have? And it's pretty alarming for most people. So yeah, I think it's important to follow through on your instruction. And when you're asking the reader to do something, make it easy for them to be successful.
Well, that's key in your book too. It's like a workbook, right? You talk about these ideas, you talk about these processes, you talk about these self-care items, and then you take them through an easy process to implement it. And I think that's just so cool and easy to do, right? I can easily do this.
Well, it sounds easy. We all know that, journaling is an important self-care tool, but really it's a bit overwhelming when you stop and think about, well, what do I journal in? Do I have to have a nice journal? Can I use a notebook? Can I use the back of an envelope? When do I do it? How often? If I'm going to be successful, what give me some directives here, right? So that's why here's how to get started. Here's some journaling prompts. Here are some questions to ask yourself to help you get started, because our young adults especially don't have patience. So if you can't make it simple and effective for them, they're not going to do it.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's brilliant, Kristi, that you are helping young people to discover self-care, because they rely so much on somebody else taking care of the stuff. Mom shops for all the food, for instance. Dad makes it. He's a great chef, whatever. And the teenager perhaps doesn't even have to worry about making their own food. It's just whatever's in the refrigerator. So the fact that you're helping them to become aware of the choices they have with what choices they're given, here's the options. Which ones are going to be the best options for you?
Well,
I think that's really brilliant and important, because it provides them another way to make them more responsible for themselves, which is a great training for the future, of course.
Well, that's why when I started reading the book, my intent was to make it for young adults, junior high, high school kids, college age kids, up to 25, 30. And then I started thinking, wait a minute, the parents, the teachers, all the adults need this book too, because if we're leading by example, how are you going to know what I'm telling your kids if you don't read it too and lead by example?
Right.
So I'm getting a lot of feedback, particularly from the adults, saying, I did not realize how much sugar I was consuming and how this is why I've gained all this weight. And so they're going to their kids and saying, okay, I'm changing how I'm cooking.
Yeah. We
are not having desserts. There will be no sodas passing through the doors of this home. You will never have a soda again. Right. So, and then they log together. So it's kind of a cool thing to see parents kind of interacting with their kids on this, because they're kind of learning right along with their kids. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, when it becomes a family project, it's so much more successful, right? Because then even the youngest family member can take that investment, and they have some skin in the game to the way that the whole family is trying to improve in this one area. And then, of course, they have individual goals they can work on as well. But, I think it's brilliant, and I think it turns all of this unspent energy they have right now towards something worthy, in self-improvement. So I commend you for that. That's pretty awesome.
Thank you. And I think one of the really important things that I included was check-ins, because the goal that I'm trying to teach our young adults is check in with yourself throughout the day several times And that's what being present is all about. So in other words, right now, I would say to my audience, how long have you been sitting? And they'll think to themselves, well, I've been sitting for 2 hours. Well, that's way too long. So now I've checked in with you. You're now realizing you're a little bit uncomfortable because you've been sitting so long. But the key is to take action in the present moment to do something about it. So I would have you stand up. I will have you go outside and get some fresh air for 5 minutes. I will have you get up and stretch. So throughout the book, I have a little stopwatch and I check in with the reader throughout the book. Okay, when's the last time you ate? Well, I ate 6 hours ago. Well, maybe your blood sugar's low. Maybe you should get up right now and get a snack. It's about training people.
Awareness.
Something in the present moment, in real time, to take action, to do something to improve their mood. And I think that's key, to do that throughout the day.
That's big. That's big. I can relate. Living a robotic life, it wasn't until my 40s that I became aware of these kinds of things you're talking about, and having that empowerment as a teen, as a young adult. That's awareness. That's a connection with yourself inside.
Right. And then if your blood sugar's low, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty miserable and I am not going to be effective no matter what I'm doing. And I give my permission, I've trained myself, stop what you're doing and go get a healthy snack so that your blood sugar goes back up and you will feel better and you will be more productive. Instead of, oh man, I'm starving, but I have to, plow through this project.
Right.
That's not self-care.
Right? Do you have anything worked out with your programs, Kristi, where you can send a text to your clients about every 40 minutes and say, get up and do something?
Hey, what are you doing?
Because I would pay for that.
Well, I'll set you on my notifications right now. And I'll have it go off every 5 minutes. How's that?
Well, that was big for me, understanding hydration.
Yeah.
Right? Just understanding, why am I so foggy? Why am I so cloudy? Why is my motivation low? Am I hydrated? When's the last time I drank a glass of water? That was huge for me. And it wasn't until I was in my 40s that I figured all of that out.
No, and it seems like such a simple thing. And it is pretty basic, but it makes a big difference in the way you feel. And you know what? We can't take for granted that people just know to do these things. You just said you didn't even know to drink water, right?
Yeah.
So don't take anything for granted. People need a roadmap for self-care. This is the best way to take care of yourself. Here's why, and here's how to get started. And my goal is I want the reader to be able to rely on these tools time and time again and refer back to it, bend the ears of pages that really resonate with them, or, pull out a page, put it on the refrigerator, whatever resonates with you. And it's also important to realize that all those 5 areas of self-care I was talking about, you may find yourself focusing on one of those areas more so than the other on any given day. Maybe it's physical for you. Maybe you're feeling sluggish and you're not eating well and you're not hydrated. So really all you can focus on self-care wise that day is to take care of yourself physically. And that's okay. You don't have to allot equal time to each different category.
Well, and I think you talked about it in your book. It's just forming a habit, right? And then it becomes second nature. So you talk about these 5 self-care. What's another one? Give us another one. These are cool.
Well, I think people were pretty surprised that I included financial self-care in a book for young adults. But when you think about it, if I had those tools when I was in high school,
totally,
I didn't understand money at all. Whatever I made, I spent.
Yep.
And then in college, when I discovered credit cards, and that was free money, right? So I could go shopping and do whatever.
I could have
anything I wanted. And I was so irresponsible. No. And now looking back, if I had some financial tools back then, just to put away a little bit every month, to not live beyond my means, just some basic financial sound principles, it really makes a difference, because I tell you what, it takes you years to get out of some of that financial debt.
Yeah, totally.
And so that's something that we don't learn in school typically. And it's something that needs to be taught at a young age, because you can get into debt very quickly, especially when you're young and you're kind of feeling like, you're acting impulsively. So, take that credit card shopping, and that adds up. And financial stress is a huge source of anxiety, not just for adults, but it also is for young.
Overwhelming. It can be overwhelming.
Yes, it can be one of the biggest causes of stress.
Yeah. Kristi, I have several students who have actually admitted to me that they have ADHD. It's certainly something I would suspect. And then, and then they would come out and say it. And so I have had to work with some of those students to make sure that we change up activity throughout a 90-minute class, every 5 minutes or something like that, or I point something out, or I make a noise or something like that. What do you advise for these types of kids and even adults? And how does your book help them? Because I know it's hard to stay on a routine sometimes with that kind of.
That's why you can't overwhelm them with too much information at once. Break it up into small tidbits. Make sure they grasp it before you move on to the next thing. Go back and review it, and make sure that you're not overwhelming them, because that's when you're going to lose them.
Yeah.
And that's true with everybody. You've got to start out small, lower your expectations, which is hard to do because you want to give them as much information as possible. And that's not always the best. So start small and move forward slowly, and make sure that you are getting interaction from them. They will tell you if you're going at the right pace.
Yeah.
And if not, where do you need to back up? Where did you lose them? And when is it time to shift and give them a break? So I think a lot of it is just staying in tune with them, and then getting verbal feedback, and just making sure that you watch for the signs that you are giving them too much information.
Yeah. Are you speaking to youth groups now? I know that we've all been kind of online in these Zoom summits and programs and so forth, but have you found opportunities and stages to speak on?
I am doing everything remotely right now. I'm talking to lots of different groups, like you said, summits, conventions, that type of thing. But I have not been in person in the classroom.
Yeah, I don't think any of us have.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
so
coming.
What kind of vibes are you getting then from these people that you're talking to, from the youth specifically? What do they say their biggest needs are?
I think it's loss of connection, especially for the high school kids and college kids. The big part of that life experience at that age, and they're not getting it. And I need to work really hard to put their minds at ease that it's okay and it's normal.
Yeah.
And it's okay to feel bad, and validate that you're not going crazy. It's part of the pandemic. And then, okay, let's work together to find how you can reach out to family and friends. What could you do? What can you do remotely? Are you calling people? Are you making an effort to stay connected? And usually they've reached a point where they've kind of given up.
Yeah.
And they're so overwhelmed they don't know how to get back into it. And especially for some of the kids that are not as outgoing, they've always relied on the more extroverted friends to get the groups together and to plan and organize activities. And that's what's really hard.
Well, I know when you think about these kids who were budding athletes, and who had these hopes and dreams to play professional sports of some kind.
Yeah.
And all of that door was just completely closed for them. I know it's temporary, and I think schools are starting to open up their sports programs again. But, if for a kid who's now been sedentary for a year, it's going to be hard to get back into that physical shape that you need to be in to excel in sports like that. And you just feel so bad for kids like that. And I was going to mention earlier that as you talk about your book being a roadmap, isn't it important to have not only with that roadmap, but also to have that routine? that it's really important for kids to feel that they know every day what they can do, what they can expect, and what they might be able to get out of all of those decisions they make.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's got to be something, that's why in the back of the chapters, what time works best for you every morning, or it's not does this work? It's like what time works best for you.
When can you do what can you
in the morning or before you go to bed? What's more convenient? Okay, that's what we're going to stick to. So it's got to be repetitive. Just like anything, it takes hundreds of times for something to become a habit. So if I'm telling you, you have control over how you think, and let's learn to start changing our thinking to become more positive, your day is going to go better. You're going to attract different energy. You're going to attract different people. That sounds great, but how do you do that? You've got to put the effort in. It's not like I wish I could be like Jason. He's always so happy. Well, maybe Jason isn't always that happy. Maybe Jason works on it, gets out of bed, thinks of 3 things right out of the gates that he's thankful for and grateful for, and sets his mindset in a positive tone for the day. It doesn't come naturally for most of us. We have to work at it. But just to know that that's possible through a little effort and repetition and routine, I think that's pretty exciting.
Well, exercise too, Kristi, is an important exercise. And because like Jackie said, kids are sedentary. They're not doing anything, and you have to go out for walks. You have to do things to move those otherwise they atrophy.
Well, and not only that, it changes your brain chemistry.
Well, that's the other thing. There's chemical things that occur in the body when you exert yourself.
And that's why I talk about all these different hormones, these neurochemicals in your brain that actually change the way you feel and think. So now, if you know you're going to have a chemical reaction in your brain that's natural, you're going to be more motivated to do these things like exercise. Exercise raises the endorphins in your brain. When you come back from exercising, do you ever have that conversation where you're with yourself and say, "Oh, I'm so glad I did that"? Right? It's because you feel,
why don't I do this more often?
Right. Why have I not done that in the last 3 months? It's because it did change and alter your brain chemistry. And that is true with all of these self-care tools. They change the way that you think and the neuroscience of your brain. And so when you do all these things in combination, you're going to be building a foundation to have a really healthy, positive brain.
Do you teach them that self-talk in your book? Do you teach them how to really kind of work through some of those things?
Yeah, because it's hard to come up with that stuff yourself.
Yeah.
Right. So there's prompts at the end of chapters like, here are some things. What are you grateful for? And there's a list of things. You can pick from the list. You can come up with your own. Or if you're going to journal, here are some questions to ask yourself. What am I grateful for? What am I enjoying? How did my day go? What am I what positive things happened today? So I kind of give them some direction to get them out on a positive mindset. And then once they get more comfortable, they can kind of mix and match things themselves.
Gratitude's huge. That's a huge chemical factory in our brains. And I really didn't realize that until medical science started coming out and saying, hey, a gratitude practice actually will help you in a mental capacity be mentally healthy.
Right. And everything I'm talking about is emotional, mental, spiritual self-care. And your brain is a big part of that. So that has to be kind of in that stimulated and healthy and positive. And then everything else starts to kind of fall into place.
How does the spiritual part play? Especially with young kids. In today's world, religion is, they are having a hard time with population and getting people to come to church. I don't know that that's true spirituality. That's, organized religion, but are kids hungry for that spiritual sense, or do they even know about it?
I think they're struggling. I'm not sure that they know exactly what they're lacking or what they're hungry for. But the spirituality, that can be just getting in touch with yourself and making that connection with nature and your family and friends. Start there. You know, you don't have to get involved in any kind of organized religion. That's not what spirituality is.
Right.
If that resonates with you, that's great. But I don't know, you know, for me, I went to church several times a day growing up as a young kid. I had no idea what was going on in church, and it just wasn't real meaningful for me. So I'm not the biggest fan of, you know, just going to church because,
Right.
you know, I think you have to find whatever is a fit and a match for you. That's why I don't think it's good to push that on young adults.
Well, religion, but spirituality, I mean, that's
Oh, absolutely.
a huge part of it. I grew up that way too. Go to church and I was like, well, what am I doing here? They shoot rockets where heaven is and they drill for oil where hell is. And this doesn't make any sense.
What's the point? And, you know, and then in Bible school, we had donuts. That was nice. We had recess. But looking back, I just went because I had to. So I think the spirituality is kind of find what resonates with you. That's why the title of the book is Be Yourself.
Yeah.
Let's not try to make you anybody that you're not, but finding that spiritual side of you makes you only better. So I'm not asking you to be somebody that you're not.
That's so cool that you approach it that way, because it's not really pointing, go this way, do this, get that. It's like, here's the idea.
Here's some tools to help you figure out how you can be even better.
That is so cool.
And you've got to kind of go on your own journey. I can give you tools and guide you, but you're going to go back and forth and up and down, and you're going to kind of take your own route to get there. But that's what my intent was.
Yeah, very cool.
Well, Kristi, you know, with the increase by tremendous percentage points of suicide among our young people in this last year, I wish that our government would take some of that budget money and give everybody your book.
You know,
give all the young people your book.
Or I'll win the lottery and buy them myself for everybody.
That's right. I mean, because the government programs we got right now, they're not working. In fact, our kids are falling through the cracks. And that's been proven even more so over the last year. And lots of parents are figuring out, the school hasn't really been helping my student anyway, my son or daughter.
Right.
And so, you know, there's a lot of low expectations now for going forward. And I wonder, you know, how kids can maybe buck some of those expectations that their parents had for them before. Because I know a lot of my students, they're expected to be, you know, geniuses academically, or they're expected to be virtuoso musicians, or they're expected to be super athletes. And there's all this pressure that we put on our kids. And I hope that some of that pressure has been released a little bit during the pandemic, that parents have sort of maybe stepped back a little bit and said, you know what, you know, we'll figure this out later. I hope that's happening. But I also, at the same time, I hope that the young people are realizing that they still have choices before them. They still have opportunity to be whatever they want to be. And I think that's where that spirituality comes in, is that find out who you really are, find out what you want to do, and then work toward that. Because I'm seeing a big lack of motivation in my students to do really anything. There's not the deadlines, there's not, you know, the homework assignments that have to be done at a particular time. They've had this freedom to just do whatever. And, you know, they haven't had a lot of good choices actually. And so now they lack this motivation to do anything. And I'm concerned about that, because I'm thinking, well, what can I do to really get them motivated again? And I will ask you, the expert, what is it that I can do? What is it that parents can do and teachers to really start to motivate these kids again?
I think we as adults all need to lower our expectations of our youth. Dial it down a bit. They don't have to get straight A's. They don't have to, you know, be the best athlete, the best at everything. Their mental health must come first. If they don't have that, they're not healthy. None of this other stuff is going to matter. And also, I think we need to lead by example, and we need to be all inclusive and work together as families, like we talked about earlier. Because I'm finding the parents are not taking care of themselves either. They're stressed, or they're working from home. I have a lot of teachers that have 3 kids at home and they're teaching remotely, and then they're trying to make a difference to the kids on Zoom.
Right.
And it's a lose-lose for everybody. So we all need to dial it back a bit and take some pressure off. This is an unprecedented time. It's okay to not do everything perfectly. And you know what? We're not going to get everything done we want to. And that's okay. We're not leaving any room for fun. We're not, it's like, okay, we've got to use what time we have. You got to get your homework done. You've got to excel because I want you to get into these particular colleges. And that's not fair to our kids.
The pressure.
They need some time to just be kids. That's
Well, I appreciate that message for me, Kristi, because I feel like I have been working 24/7 and I'm getting a little burned out. And so the fact that you're saying, yeah, you need to take some time for fun and give yourself a break. I'm like, yeah, I should probably follow that philosophy.
Well, you know what, Jackie, there's probably people that you're interacting with that can sense that.
Yeah.
Whether it's coworkers or kids or whatever. So you need to lead by example. I'm not going to work 24/7 anymore. I'm going to skip that group. I'm going to cut back on what I'm doing because I need to put myself and my mental health first.
Yeah.
Hobby,
Sure.
right? Need a hobby.
Yeah.
I have lots of hobbies. I don't have a problem in that arena.
Now, are your hobbies actually work like projects at home? Is that what your hobbies are?
Totally. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
They're all around me. What do I want to do today? Anyway, what are we missing, Kristi? We have about 10 minutes left, and you have such an amazing book, and it's Oh, where did I go? I lost it. Tell us the name of your book. Do you have a copy
You
there?
Only Better, right?
I do have a copy here.
There you go.
Be You, Only Better, Real Life Self-Care for Young Adults and Everyone Else. And it's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, bookstores everywhere. And it's also on my website at thegriefgirl.com. But, I ended the book with a message of hope. And I wanted people to realize that hope isn't just, I hope things get better tomorrow. I hope tomorrow goes better. It's about developing a positive lifestyle so that you every day wake up with gratitude and you're in a positive mindset. And it's not something that's fleeting and temporary. It's a lifestyle. So that's why I really liked ending the book with a message of hope, and then how to develop that lifestyle of hope.
Well, you're certainly credible to teach that, Kristi. We haven't talked about your personal story in this during this episode, but it might be time to take a few minutes to let everybody know that you have been through that cycle of grief very deeply, and that you see a way out and you see a way forward once you make it out.
Right.
So maybe you take a second or two to talk a little bit about that.
Well, 8 years ago, my husband died by suicide. He ran in front of a train in Dana Point where we lived. And what added to that trauma is his father was a passenger on the train that he ran in front of. So, not only was I dealing with my husband, who had been exhibiting signs of depression and suicidal ideation for a year prior to his suicide, but he was an only child and his father was actually on the train. So then I'm figuring out, was he trying to punish him? Why would he do that to his father, who he loved very much? Why would he do that to me? I was really blindsided. I didn't have any tools to deal with it. And so that's kind of what got me started on my passion for suicide prevention. So then I started out, writing about, first of all, grief tips with examples of what I did that first year to get through or move forward in my grief journey. And then I wrote Beneath the Surface, a teen's guide to reaching out when you or a friend are in crisis. And that covers all the different issues our teens face today, from cyberbullying to self-harm, peer pressure, adult pressure, self-pressure, gender confusion, anxiety, depression, suicide, all those issues, because we're not talking about it in schools. So I kind of wrote that in hopes that it could serve as an aid to health teachers in our schools. and get people to start talking about it and finding that adult that they trust to talk to about their issues. And then my last book, Be You Only Better, it's like, let's do something before you even get to that place of anxiety or suicidal ideation. So it basically comes from me being in a really dark place where I needed help. And then that got me into the grief counseling because I didn't want anybody else to have to go through what I'd experienced.
Yeah.
And then give examples of what worked for me. You know, I'm also a credentialed teacher, so I know that kids and adults need to be told why you do something and what works. And so I'm just continuing my passion for suicide education and prevention. And I am really dead set on that, starting with our young people. So when they grew up, they have a whole different culture than how we grew up. You know, my husband had already bought into that stigma.
Yeah.
You know, he didn't say, hey, I need help.
Right.
So I want our kids and our youth to grow up differently.
With some tools. So the book's been out for a little while. We have about 5 minutes left. Share with us some of the things you're hearing about the book. I always like to hear what you're hearing. Testimonials. Obviously there's got to be some things that just jump out.
Well, the thing I hear most often, which I guess kind of even surprised me, is I had no idea about any of this. And I thought, you know what? I didn't at your age either. That's really what prompted me to write this. If
Cool.
I had some tools, I didn't even know I could change my brain chemistry. I thought the way I was built and wired was what I was stuck with for the rest of my life. So it really kind of woke me up. They don't have a clue of where to start. You know, they might go exercise every now and then because they don't want to gain weight, but they don't know how it's changing their brain and altering, you know, those endorphins. So that's probably the most interesting feedback I've gotten, is I didn't have any idea about any of this. And also I've gotten lots of feedback from teachers who have said, I didn't know most of what was in the book, you know what? And now I'm going to use this as a resource with my students, but
Cool.
I need to be on the same page as they are. Because if you just hand this book to your young adults, your kids, and say, read it, they're not going to read it. You know, so you have to be able to interact and discuss really what the content is all about, because they know if you're interested or not.
So I have to have a different approach. As I'm reading and scanning through your book, I'm thinking, I'm going to buy 4 copies, one for my assistant and my 3 daughters, and I'm going to hand it to them. So I have to change my approach a little bit, Kristi, and say,
okay, Todd, when we get off the air here, you have to sit down and read it from cover to cover. And then you have a little highlighter and you mark the things that really resonate with you as you read it. And then something that really stands out, you go to your coworker or one of your kids and you say, did you know that when you drink 1 can of Coke, you're consuming all the sugar that you need in a day? Or did you know that if you miss 1 night's sleep, you actually have little micro sleeps where you fall asleep periodically throughout the day? And that feeling where you can't find your keys, or you pull up in front of a store and you don't really remember how you got there. You know, I mean, so it's dangerous. After 2 days of not sleeping, you actually start to hallucinate. So
hold them accountable.
Find an interesting stat in the book that resonated with you and just share that. Yeah. And that may make them more interested in getting involved and reading about the tools.
Okay, I got a prescription from Dr. Kristi.
There you go. And Kristi, I on the speakfeedly.org website, which is our nonprofit for children, serving children, we have a store, and I would love to feature your books on our store and let my network of parents and students know about your message, because not only is the book something that they should have, but I think you are an example of who they can strive to be, right? Because you have gone to the lowest low that life can hand anybody, is to lose someone through a tragic decision. And then work through, how do you come back from that? And then because of that tragedy, your life is put on a new course that is now inspiring thousands and hundreds of thousands and changing the lives of the most vulnerable people in our society. So that in itself is something that our youth need to see, that this tragedy they've experienced over the last year is somehow going to benefit them. It's somehow going to put them on a path where they are going to, like you, be able to inspire people through their own story. And that's what I look at as a wonderful example.
Thank you. And it's important for your listeners to know you do have that choice. I could have become a victim of my situation and stayed in bed and not talked about it and felt sorry for myself. Or I could make the choice to use my pain to help other people. And as I was trying to move forward and figure out how to do that, it didn't happen overnight, but there were gaping holes all over the place. I don't have the tools. I don't know how to change my thinking. I don't know how to change my brain chemistry. I'm not as grateful as I should be. I don't have the lifestyle of hope. So a lot of these things that I am now teaching were lacking in my life, and I had to find them. And so really, I don't want people to have to spend all that time figuring it out themselves. So that's what made me really passionate to write and then give people those tools so that they can just, start moving forward right away.
Well, we're glad you did.
Yeah, very cool. Thank you so much, Kristi, for showing up today as you. We really appreciate it. I hope you'll come back on the show.
Absolutely, anytime.
Did you have fun today?
I did have fun.
I told you have a blast. Thanks again. It's just such a joy to have you. You have a great message, a really cool book. Hold the book up again for us. There it is. Be You Only Better. It's a great book. You can find the link to Kristi and her website on lifemasterradio.net. Go and check it out. Lastly, or a couple last little things here is tell a friend about the show. We had a great time today. I know you had a great time today. Your friends deserve to hear these great thoughts and ideas for them to use on their life mastery journey. Lastly, please, please, please make it a great day because, as Kristi said, it is all about choice. Bye-bye for now. There we go. I have not heard from our engineer. We are still live, but he'll figure it out. Thanks again, Kristi. We really appreciate it. I'll have links for all of the YouTube and everything else. Jackie's going to create a blog post about what she learned and what she picked up today. Yeah.
Great. Thank
Awesome.
you.
We'll talk to you again real soon.
Okay.
All right.
See you later.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.